to the Esoteric Deathspiral of music.
We did it.
Okay. Welcome back, everyone, to the Esoteric Music Deathspiral. I am Noisebandit, and I am here with Ray the Offbeat Otaku, Ray the Eldritch Enby, whatever you want to do.
Hello.
And today, we are with a special guest, and by guest I mean a new permanent member, Princess Plunderphonics, otherwise known as Max.
Hello.
Alright.
I'm gay.
Perfect. So to start off this episode, I want to make some beginning notes about this. So, firstly, the last episode I spelled esoteric wrong. I spelled it estoteric with an extra T. I'm super embarrassed about that. Also, the video looked like garbage. It was 720p, and it didn't fill up the whole screen because it wasn't 1920 by 1080p. So yeah, to rectify that, the editing duties will now be given to Ray and Max, which is I hope that stands. Alright.
So now instead of the video being garbage, everything else will be garbage because I'm lazy.
Dabs.
Anyway, so what album are we talking about today? I asked myself. We're talking about one of my favorite albums this time, Carnavas, the debut album of indie rock / shoegaze / whatever band, Silversun Pickups.
Yeah, the first album by a band with a name that reminds me of the band Silver Spoon. But, you know, they're not the same thing at all.
No.
That was my comment.
No, it says here on Wikipedia that the name Silversun Pickups was derived from a liquor store located across from the Silver Lake Lounge. And then in interviews, the band has said the name, though, is, quote, more of a state of mind.
Perfect. Also, I meant to say the band Silverchair, not Silver Spoon. I don't know what Silver Spoon is.
Well, Silver Spoon is the anime.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's also the other thing that came up when I looked it up was that it was an anime and manga. But that's not the topic for this podcast. This is Carnavas by Silversun Pickups, or Gold Moon Guitar Neck.
Gold Moon Guitar Neck.
I was trying to do like a play on, like, you know, you have silver instead of gold.
Yes.
Yeah, whatever. Okay. But so who wants to give their thoughts on this album first?
Well, I mean, I guess I kind of already gave mine. This is one of my favorite albums. You know, people who are like, I don't give 10s to things because things aren't perfect, they're stupid, and everybody should know that when you give something a 10, you know it's not perfect, as is the case with this album and me. So, yeah, I'd say, like, probably after, like, it's probably, like, my 4th or 5th favorite album.
Alright. So, if I had to give my thoughts on it, just in general, I'd say I enjoyed it a little bit. Okay, maybe that's a bit of... No, I enjoyed it, like, sort of not a lot or a little, sort of in the middle. I enjoyed it
quite a bit.
Yeah, quite a bit. I thought it had a really interesting sound. There were some things that I didn't really like about it, but we'll get into that when we, you know, when we, like, sort of... when we actually all start talking about it. So, yeah. Alright, what are your thoughts, Max, on it?
I thought the album was actually really great. I think it could be one of my favorites if some things were changed, but regardless, I think it's like a decent, strong 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I give it a mid 7.5, or like just 7.5. I don't know.
A decent to a strong 7.
Sure, yeah, that works. And
just just default to Fantano when you're not sure.
Yeah, default to Melon Man.
Exactly. When you're feeling melancholy, default to the Melon Boy.
The melancholic boy man thing. New name when.
Okay, so I guess we kind of introduced the band. I guess just the only other things I should note is that they had they had already formed before this album. They had done an EP that was just 7 tracks long, and with a lot of bands, you can kind of see their sound forming. However, one thing that's never changed about them, in spite of their pretty drastic sound changes between their first couple projects, is the lineup.
Which is, I look here, it's mostly been the same, except for like 2 people who left like 2 years afterwards, but it's been like the same 4 people ever since.
Yeah, it's like for all their recorded material, which is just the main guy, Brian Aubert, guitars and vocals. I'm not gonna name everybody because I probably won't talk much about Christopher Guanlau, the drummer, and Joe Lester, the keyboardist, like by their names. And then Nicky Monger, who does bass and backup vocals. And one thing I want to say is I think it's cool that this band only has 1 guitarist. I think, like the Mars Volta, if you told me this was a 2-guitar band, I'd believe you.
Yeah, because I guess I could I could see that as well, because on this album it definitely did feel like there were multiple guitars at points, just because of how thick his guitar sound is.
Yeah, and
like,
it's definitely got a lot of overdubs.
Yeah, lots and lots of overdubs. But
hell yeah. So I mean, I guess we're pretty much done with the general impressions. So do you guys want to get into just track by tracks?
Yeah. So to describe the first song, Melatonin, this song is definitely like an interesting way to start an album, because it's not that long of a song. It's only 4 minutes, but it's very like thick with the guitars. It's just like, and the guitars don't even like play that fast or change chords that much. So it kind of just like I don't remember the whole thing, but it feels definitely like stripped back shoegaze, if I could describe it.
Yeah, it's the chord progression in this song, I've learned it myself because it's pretty easy. It's 7 chords where they play 4 chords and then they just take out the first chord and do the second 3 again. So it's like they're really, it's kind of a way to keep it not like a little static, but still having some movement in the chord progression, which I really appreciate there.
Right.
And then they kind of, one thing that's cool is that, so they have like 2 guitar tracks of just rhythm guitars, and then over that they have a lead guitar that's kind of sometimes playing its own melody, sometimes playing along with the vocals. And then there's the keyboard, which is just kind of filling in the space between the rhythm guitars, is the best way I could put it, is because they'll fade out in a couple of the verses, which is the keyboard, the kind of almost hip-hop-esque drum beat in the background there. There's a few songs where I'd say the drum beats here I think are really interesting in that they do sound kind of hip-hoppy.
I think the song that came to my mind first listening to this was Pepper by Butthole Surfers. If that makes sense, like it has the same like chord, it's in the same key, it's in G, and it has sort of the same drum beat, and maybe not the same vocal style, but like the same kind of drony vocals.
Yeah.
You know, it reminded me of that. So yeah.
Yeah, this song, it's interesting in that, like, it has a pretty clear climax towards the end with the lead guitar really kind of climbing up into the higher range there. But it still retains this mix of being kind of drony, but at the same time, it's pretty energetic. Like, it's everything is playing 16th notes the whole time. It's just not in that fast of a tempo.
Yeah. So, is that all the thoughts for the first track? Do you have anything to add, Max?
One thing, this is probably actually my favorite or second favorite track on the album, period. Nice. Simply because I feel like the vocals are really infectious. Like, the way they are mixed and layered is just, like, really adds to the song, and it's also really catchy. I really prioritize and like really value catchiness in music, and especially pop music. which like I'm using pop music as like an umbrella term, not really like a genre term.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, most things that we'll talk about on this show could probably still be called pop music by some kind of definition, because it's the vaguest term in art. Not really, but you know what I mean. Just quick thing, I totally agree. I didn't really mention the vocals, which that can be kind of a sticking point for people. The Brian Aubert, he's kind of nasally, which everyone compares this band to Smashing Pumpkins, and to me he's like to me when I think because I've listened to some of their stuff and I'm not that big a fan of Billy Corgan as a singer, I think it kind of helps me appreciate Aubert even more, even though I already liked his vocals.
Yeah.
He with Corgan, it's like he's either like really abrasive or like really kind of nasally and like crooning. I think Aubert is better at kind of reaching like a middle ground. Like on most of these songs, he sounds kind of angsty, but like I don't know. I think it's a good balance. And this track particularly is kind of laying on the vocal harmonies pretty thick. Yeah.
If I had to say, my biggest issue with this album, and probably this band in general, was his vocals.
Yeah.
I just wasn't a big fan of it, honestly. It kind of had that, the Billy Corgan-esque thing. Since I don't really like the Smashing Pumpkins because of Billy Corgan's voice, I fucking hated it. But it just, also he's a weird conspiracy theorist, so there's that as well. I have to say, if there's one band that I think reminded me most with the vocals was Sunny Day Real Estate. Jeremy Ennick from that band. He has very similar style, except I like his style more because it's a lot less nasally and a lot more calm, and especially on Sunny Day Real Estate's later albums, his voice definitely matures a lot more when compared on albums like Diary and the self-titled. But yeah, the vocals were kind of the lowest point for me. Everything else was pretty fine, but I don't know, the vocals just kind of didn't get me.
I will say, the first couple times I listened to this album, when he starts getting like, not quite, it's not like metal screaming, but when he's kind of screaming on tracks 5 and 7 here, the first couple times I listened to it, I was like, why? But I've listened to this album enough times now, and I get so into it now that I'm like, I feel it.
Alright. So, next track is Well Thought Out Twinkles.
Twinkies? Oh my god.
Yeah, sometimes I read it out as Twinkies, but it is Twinkles. Well Thought Out Twinkles. And I think I described the song to you back when I first listened to it. And I described it as Led Zeppelin if they were roughly shoegaze with the vocals of an emo band. And the reason why I say that is because the main riff on this song, the beginning riff, the da na 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 da na 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 na, it really reminded me of like a Led Zeppelin riff with like the heaviness and the fuzz. But this song I liked it a lot. It had a lot more energy to it. It had the nice riffing to it. The vocals weren't as like whiny on this song. I think the bass line was good, especially the very sort of on and off thumpy thing, and it was a lot more straightforward rock, which I thought was nice when compared to sort of. I mean, I'm not gonna say that I'm like not a fan of slow stuff because I'm a big fan of post rock, but I think definitely for their sound, I think this song definitely did fit a lot nicer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
The sound of this song. One thing I think is interesting. There's a real. So this band. One of their influences would be My Bloody Valentine, and I think similar to a lot of songs on Loveless, one thing I think is interesting about this song is that it kind of doesn't have a chorus, and that the chorus is like instrumental. It's just that kind of pounding riff that really makes up the chorus here, and I think that's nice because it kind of makes the song structure here feel less traditional than it really is.
Right.
And I could kind of say the same for Melatonin because it's kind of just the same chord progression throughout the whole thing. But in this case, it's like when you're in these verses, and then you're kind of almost in these interlude sections, really, since it's all instrumental. I think when you get into the bridge, it really makes it feel like it's a new thing coming in. You're like, whoa,
yeah, 'cause it's
where are we
calmer.
going now? Even though it's like it's a similar riff from the chorus, it's just they kind of take the riff, cut off the little things they do at the end of it. Things, very musical theory term right there, and just kind of make it into a chord progression.
Right. I think definitely this band kind of has sort of a what's the word? Sort of a I don't know what you would call it, but sort of like not tone, but like not a, I don't know how to cliche, but like sort of routine. That's what I meant. Routine of like, strong song at first, but then like it goes quieter during one part or at the beginning or something. It has a lot of sort of shifting dynamics, and it really reminds me of like some other post-rock bands in that way, where the whole. I wouldn't say it does sort of the what we like to call the quiet, loud, quiet thing that like Pixies were most known for, but it has sort of it's a lot more dynamic than a lot of other bands that I've listened to, and I'll give it that. It's very interesting with the way it decides to choose where it goes quiet and where it doesn't.
Well, and especially on this one, this is where this is the first song where they just kind of throw in these big overdub swells of noise, which really just makes this feel a lot bigger than it kind of is. Like, I'm looking at the lyrics right now. I have no clue what this song is about, but like, the one that always sticks with me is "Come join in the last hurrah with open sores and open jaw," which always just sounds like which it sounds like a lyric about everything, and when that comes in and it's kind of backed by this guitar in the background, it's great. Right. That is one thing I'll say in favor of this band lyrically, is that I don't always know what they're talking about, but I feel like this band does a good job lyrically, because like a lot of the phrases they come up with just feel right. Like, I'm not always sure what every lyric means, but there's some where I can just really kind of latch on to that and feel it.
Yeah, this band has weird lyrics, but sort of not in the way that other bands do. It feels a lot more like emotional. It has that kind of sort of it's not, but it's also not like super bizarre. It's just kind of like in the middle weird, which I think is interesting, especially when compared to bands that I like, which tend to have very sort of weird sort of lyrics that don't make a lot of sense and feel like they just took adjective and verb and smashed them into a sentence and go, this kind of sounds like something. This album or this band kind of feels like they actually try to put a little bit of thought into it. Well, does that make sense?
I mean, I think the Mars Volta put a lot of thought into their lyrics.
I mean, like, maybe on like their concept albums, but not the ones where there isn't a concept. Those ones are a bit more vague, but
true.
We'll get that when we get there.
Yeah.
So.
And what we always talk over you, Max. Whenever your favorite song on the album comes on, we're gonna let you talk first.
Yeah, I feel like you've been a bit quiet this time. It's just been us two dominating it.
Oh, it's fine. But like, this song does sound like a Smashing Pumpkins song. It does sound like a specific Smashing Pumpkins song, but instead of it being like a 5 out of 10, it's a 9 out of 10. Because the structure is actually very interesting, like you said, with like the noise just being put in there in the later section of the song. And I'd say like the way this band kind of handles song structure is similar to that of like kind of Coheed and Cambria.
Yeah, I'm gonna compare them to Coheed a couple times throughout this. I was gonna mention that with the lyrics. I feel like they're kind of like if you took Coheed lyrics, kind of removed the sci-fi concept from them, because similarly it's like they're kind of a mix between like flowery and like occasionally very straightforward, but it always just feels like kind of big, almost kind of teenagery emotions, and that's one thing I'll also say in defense of the vocals of this album, is that I feel like even if you don't really like them, I feel like they match the tone.
Yeah, no, I can say that for certain. I can't imagine this band having the same vocals as, like, I don't know, what's a band with, like, a really low vocalist? I don't know, like, I can't imagine Johnny Cash singing over this. Is what I'm saying. That would be funny,
hope
though.
He does.
Johnny Cash cover of Silversun Pickups.
Yeah.
Make the album now, Granddad, or whatever the hell his name is.
Yeah. So, anything else we want to say about this song?
Not really. All right. Next song, Checkered Floor. This is another one of the calmer songs in the album, I would say.
And
it starts off with like a bit of like the quiet sort of interlocking guitar sound, which is with a very sort of clean sort of riff to it, which I always like it when bands do that, because it always sort of it either sort of signals of like a build up, or like you're gonna be in for like a very calm, relaxing time.
Yeah, like this song kind of sounds like a Japanese shoegaze song, but without as much reverb. Like it does have that like very peaceful and very ethereal feel and sound to it that I really like. It's one of my favorite songs off the album.
Really, that's interesting, because I think it's one of the weaker ones, even though I do think, like, you mentioned, like, kind of sounding ethereal. I think the keyboards add a lot to that on this one. There are some keyboard parts in Well Thought Out Twinkles, and they're pretty prominent in Melatonin, but I think this is the first time where they kind of start taking on an identity of their own in the album. So I will give it that, and I will give that section in the chorus when they get into the da 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 da. I love that little chord progression.
I was gonna mention too, this is something I found really weird about the previous song, Well Thought Out Twinkles. Like right at the end, there's this weird part where the chord progression like changes completely, and like it jumps to a completely different key for like 3 seconds, and that kind of took me out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I liked in that song how it changes a little bit at the end there to really kind of give the outro a different feel, and I think it's nice because it's kind of like it building up and then just kind of suddenly cuts out, which is almost kind of like a Mars Volta thing.
It was weird to me. It kind of came out of nowhere when I listened to it. I mean, it's not bad. It's just it's different. But yeah.
But so what do you want to say about this weeb, Max?
Kind of already said what I need to say. Again, the structure is great. It's very solid. It does sound like a shoegaze song without as much reverb, and it's just I don't know. Why do you think it's particularly weak?
Well, it's not particularly weak. I don't think it's a bad or even a mediocre song. I just think so the calmer songs on this album, except for 3 Seed, I mean, I guess I'm not going to talk about the 2 bonus tracks because I think they're more boring than the rest of the album.
Yeah, also I didn't listen to those, so yeah, no.
Good. I think this song and Wasted On, track 6, they both have a slight problem where they both build to a climax, but the climax feels kind of weaker than most of the others on the album. So it's like it's almost not fully committed to being like a calmer break in the middle. I don't know, that like this song, it's kind of one that I have to be in the right mood for, because like sometimes that ending of the chorus that I mentioned, it really just hits me, but other times I just kind of, when I listen to the song, it's like, yeah, this is pretty nice.
I mean, sometimes I do have that feeling too with certain songs. Like, I'm trying to think of a good example of like other bands that I have that feeling with. I think definitely with. Actually, never mind. I don't want to spoil my thoughts on future Mars Volta albums where we're gonna do a whole thing on that. So, I'm just gonna say that I've had times where I do feel like when I am listening to an album, I do have to be in the right mood for certain songs, or else I will just skip them. And I'm assuming that's probably the example. This is the example for you.
Yeah. Well, Wasted On is the only one that I'll skip occasionally, even though I do still think it's a good song. But this one here, this is one of the songs where I think it's the first one. I think it's another one where it's one of the first ones where there's a lyric that, like, you can really tell what it means. Because, I mean, there is that refrain at the end of Melatonin where they say, "We said aloud that we can't pull out," which is not what you think they're talking about. The song Melatonin is named after a sleeping pill, and they're talking about dreaming.
Pill. It can become multiple forms other than pills.
Well, I don't care.
I'm sorry, I'm
not a doctor. But anyway, this pre-chorus lyric, concealed, pass it on, appeal, play along. It's like pretty clear what the message is there, which I think is nice after when so much of the lyric is pretty esoteric. It's a song about not being a conformist.
Nice, man. Alright.
Fucking sick.
But speaking of lyrics, if you guys don't have anything else to say, I want to get on to one of my favorite songs on the album.
Little Lover So Polite.
Yes.
So, if I had to say anything about the song, I did definitely enjoy it. I like sort of the calm feel of it. I really like the music video where it's just them, like, driving around in cars.
Yeah.
And there's this part at the end where it seems to imply that the two kids are flying or something. I don't know. That's what it looked like to me. Like the two kids were flying, but I don't know.
I haven't watched the music video in a while, so I don't remember that.
I watched it when I was listening to the album, but if I had to say, I like the way it sounds. I think what's her name?
Nikki.
Worked really well during the bridge. What?
Her name is Nikki Moninger.
Yeah, I said Nikki.
Oh, you cut out for me. So I was
sorry.
So I was letting you know.
Yeah, Nikki, her vocals definitely were pretty great during the part where it was her singing the main part. I think it worked really well. I always sort of like it when there's sort of the male-female vocal mix. When you have the sort of the female vocals playing their own part, and I like that. I also really like the solo on the song. It worked really well to sort of capture that kind of sort of melancholic, wandering sound that this song definitely has, and I liked it a lot.
Yeah. What do you have to say, Max?
This song is probably also one of my favorites. Like, this whole, like, first half of the album is amazing, but, like, I think the little, refrain or whatever it's called, I don't know music theory, it gets really calm, and it is, like, one of the best parts of the song. And, it really gives you a feeling of just, like, wonder and curiosity. Like, this song basically gives me the feeling of, like, kind of wandering around at dusk in a forest. And
I kind of got that same vibe too, sort of the wandering vibe.
Yeah.
And since I do live in what could be described as the mixture between a neighborhood and a forest, you know, it works well. It really reminds me of, you know, where I am and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just so whimsical. That's why it's a 10 out of 10.
This song gets the mood so right. Yeah, like the music video for the song is them like driving around at night, and this song, that's what it feels like. It feels like you're driving around at night and like contemplating your past relationships and stuff like that. I have like vivid memories of back when I was still in a relationship. Like if any time that anything went wrong and I was sad about that, I would always put on this song. Because it's just so, like, I really like all the lyrics here, how it's like most of them are like kind of spiteful, but at the same time they're kind of regretful, and I really like that. And then I really like the perspective shift in the chorus there. I think it's nice that you don't quite hear both sides of the story. There's a little bit of a bias, but I like that it's still that's there. And then that fucking guitar solo.
Yeah,
it's beautiful. Yeah, it's a journey. Really cool. Like this song, it's like I'm stumbling over myself because it's so good. It's like you're into these verses which are only 2 chords. The guitarist plays 2 chords, but it sets the mood perfectly. And then there's the famous, I don't know if it is famous, but to me it's famous riff, which I really love it because it's the way it just kind of like slides down on the fretboard and how it has that open string behind it. It feels like big and like kind of sad, but it doesn't feel like over the top. It kind of ramps up the emotion just a little bit from the guitar work in the verse, which is pretty minimal, in the chorus, which is really minimal. But it just like, but it still leaves room for that guitar solo to come in, and just like, yeah, I just love this song, how you're in these verses and pre-choruses and choruses for a little while, and then just all of a sudden it starts building up, and then the guitar solo is like a minute long, and like I said, it feels like a journey, and then it's like a whole, there's like that story structure chart where it's like intro, build up, rising action, climax, resolution, whatever. This song is like, if you put another story chart inside of that story chart, and then just the
storyception. Yes,
and then just there's a big resolution at the end, like a big like come down at the end. And when I first listened to this song, I was like, why is the last 30 seconds of this song just weird guitar noise? But now when I listen to it, like, I'm so immersed that it's just like, like I need that in a way, just to kind of like recollect myself.
Right. If I had to say, I've had similar experiences with Mars Volta songs, especially the ones that I really enjoy, where it really does feel like an experience. Just like you have the multiple parts, you have like the different tones, the different moods. And from what I remember of the song, I definitely did get that vibe as well. So, you seem to be in the right on this one.
Should have put my phone on silent. I'm an idiot. Don't listen to anything I say.
Right, okay.
So now that I've come for 3 minutes on end, what do you guys want to say about this? Do you have anything else to say?
Well, I did enjoy it, especially the guitar solo and the music video, which we should probably rewatch. But yeah, so I hope, I'm gonna admit this right now because I've only listened to this album once. There are certain songs that I just like do not remember at all. I hope that's okay.
That's understandable.
Yeah, so if on certain songs, I'll probably just take a back seat while you and Max talk about how much you like them. So, okay. I mean, there are certain songs which I will say a lot about because I do have some thoughts on them. But there are, especially the next 2 songs, I don't remember too much about them because I've only listened to this album once. So, that's on me.
Well, but I only listened to the last one once, and so we didn't even do a track-by-track thing there.
I mean, but you still had a lot to say on that one, so, But, yeah. So if you want to introduce the next song, you can do that.
Well, Max, I was gonna... What were you about to say?
Alright, introduce the next song, because this next song, my opinion of it, has to do with, this song as well.
Okay. What do you think about future foe scenarios?
Alright, so Little Lover's So Polite is like, you are having fun, you're out on the... Imagine for a second you're not a weeaboo and you actually are a normal person. So you're out and you're having fun, but then you start thinking about all the mistakes you've made,
Yeah.
all the past, like all the people you've hurt, how you're a terrible person and you should be killed, and then that kind of culminates in future foe scenarios.
Relatable.
And then it's like it's very angry, very versatile. You get angry at yourself because you know you're a person who've hurt everyone who tried to help you. They're just trying to be nice to you, but you hurt them. What the fuck is wrong with you? God damn it!
Whoa, did Endless just suddenly come into the call? What's going on?
References.
I agree. This song is like, this is really like kind of taken the angst from the last song and really just throwing it at the wall. I don't think that's the right metaphor, but you know what I mean. And I really like how... So, firstly, I like the riff in this song. Like, I like how it's both kind of a riff and a chord progression, because it kind of distinctly does, like, the same pattern at a bunch of different places, which I like that. But I like how it starts off with just... instantly the vocals come in and the riff, and it's just kind of quiet. And I like how just adding the drums and the bass immediately just like blow the doors open on this track, and then we're really just kind of building up for the rest of the song until we get into the into like the later sections of it. I'm not even sure what all the sections are. And they start getting the guitar overdubs and the keyboards, and then I like how the last song had like a really big resolution, and I like how this one doesn't really. It's the resolution is comparatively really quick, even though it's like even more serious than the last one.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else you wanted to say about it, Max?
I hate myself.
True. Yes. Every day. Yeah. And this is another one where I think the lyrics are interesting here. There was one time I went on songmeanings.com to try and find what
the Holy Grail
to learn about some of these songs, because I didn't know Genius existed yet. And this is, I think this song is one of the better examples for like, you can kind of see how the how kind of the vagueness of the lyrics can kind of add to it, because I've heard some like pretty drastically different like interpretations of the song. Like, I'll hear some people say, you know, it's just kind of like a general it's kind of about like regrets. You know, you have lyrics like a motorcade of meant to be's, but then you have other lyrics like who do you work for and does it work for you? And I heard some people say that that was about like the Bush administration and like the war on terror and shit. So I've heard like I've heard some people say it's like a breakup song, and I've heard like a lot of interpretations of this song, and I think that kind of shows how the lyrics work, how it's like the emotion is clear even if the words are vague, and those are always my favorite kinds of lyrics, TBH.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to say about the song Noise?
I don't remember too much from it because, again, I've only listened to this album like once, so you know.
Oh yeah, but you said the next two here, which
yeah. I will have thoughts on Lazy Eyes, so I will chime in back when but yeah.
So I'm thinking we can all agree that Wasted On is probably one of the weakest songs on the album.
Here's my thing on Wasted On. I kind of like it in this narrative I'm crafting in my head of like, now your night is completely and you're all depressed now, and it's kind of just droning and sluggish. You want to go home, and I think it being underwhelming is kind of works in its favor in this weird thing I have in my head.
That does make sense, and I like one, I think this song is a nice change of pace. It's the first time on the album where we have like a really bass driven song. and that's nice. And I like the lyrics. This is another one like Little Lover So Polite where the actual topic of it is pretty clear. This one's definitely about like kind of the vapid nature of like celebrity culture, really.
Yeah.
So I like the lyrics and I like the instrumentation, but again, for me, it's all kind of the structure where it's like it hits the where I almost feel like this one maybe didn't even need this particular bridge section because it's kind of like I don't know. Again, this one is a big mood song for me. Not literally a big mood, but as in it varies depending because sometimes that bridge is like big, but then other times I'm just kind of not feeling it. I think this album is 51 minutes long. So I do think that like so this is an album where even though like there are a couple songs that I'd identify as filler songs, I don't think it's a big deal.
Yeah, cause I can imagine that like sometimes filler songs could be pretty bad, especially when it's like a really long album. I'm just gonna say insert any double album here. Like that's the case with like most double albums. There's always filler songs because gotta fill up the space somehow.
Yeah, when we do all the Coheed albums, there will be there's one song on particular that if you took off the Afterman double albums would instantly make it better, and one song that would probably make it better. But we'll get to that when we get to that.
All right. So is that all the thoughts on Wasted On?
Wait, hold on.
I feel like I've kind of slighted this song, which I feel kind of bad about because, like I said, it is good. I don't think this song, Checkered Floor, I don't think either of them are bad. I think, for me, it's just like, for most of this album, I'm so into it that anything less than that kind of feels a little bit disappointing, almost.
Like a betrayal.
Well, I'll talk about Betrayal when I mention the next album and how that is, which isn't a bad album. It's okay. Spoiler alert.
So, are you ready for the next? So wait, Max, you had something to say, right?
The guitar solo just sounds great. I just really like the guitar solo in this song.
And actually, I shouldn't feel bad about being kind of negative on this as a song, because when we go back to talking about just the whole album and kind of the album flow, I will have positive things to say about this song. I like where it fits into the album. I think it goes nicely from kind of the quick resolution and future foe scenarios into Lazy Eye. This song's very kind of slow and kind of creepy, and kind of low register, low key. And then we get into Lazy Eye, which has a very bouncy riff that is kind of that the song is building off of.
All right, can I put my thoughts in now, because this is the first song in a while that I've had any thoughts on. All right.
Yes.
So I hope this isn't controversial. It probably will be, but this is probably my least favorite song on the album. I did not like it.
Interesting.
Because I think this is the song where the vocals really just came out to me as just bad. It just sounded very corny to me. It just sounded like, the whole like, it's very bouncy. It feels like what, if shoegaze met country. It has this like, the key is very similar. It has that kind of, not really the same mood, but just like the vocals have that really kind of just like in your face, like, especially when he does like the really fast thing with the Lazy Eye vocal where it's like do 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 the Lazy Eye. I just like cringed a little bit when I heard that. I just like, and it's weird that this song is the most popular off the album. Like, why? I did not like this song at all. I didn't like it. I was just.
I think this is the most popular song because I described that riff as bouncy, but it's like I wouldn't really call it like, I would call it a happy riff, but at the same time it's kind of anxious. Like the opening lyrics are, I've been waiting for this moment all my life, but it's not quite right. And I think that's a perfect match for the riff that as it starts out. And for me, when he starts like getting more emotional, I think it works because the song has built up so much. Like, we start off in verse 1, which is pretty long and kind of goes off in these quick little guitar tangents. And then we have the keyboards that come in, and then when we get into the second chorus here, it gets into just like the big guitar fuzz explosion, and like it really builds up, and then it kind of goes back down, and then it builds up again, and then even bigger, and then it kind of reaches a resolution. I think that's why this song got so popular, is because it, like, I think this song didn't get popular in spite of kind of doing a weird structure. I think this song got popular because of it, because it's like, because it starts off so just kind of like, again, like kind of teenage feeling. It's almost like you're waiting outside of the school for your friends or something, or like you're walking into out of a dance floor or something like that. And then it's like,
I mean, the music video for the song was literally like them playing the song in like a club.
Exactly.
So it works.
And just like, yeah, I don't know. I understand why the vocals would kind of rub you the wrong way, but for me it's like, when I listen to the album, I think for me it's like at this point I'm used to it, because he was already kind of doing this on track 5 on Future Foe Scenarios.
Right.
So what do you have to say
any
about
thoughts,
it, Max?
I really like this song, actually. I like how anxious it sounds, and I like the first 3 minutes is basically a build up to this big explosion of anger, and it's just, and I love the vocals on it as well, because I think because I've been into metal for so long that I'm a bit used to it, and I really like harsh vocals as well. So yeah, and also the guitar solo sounds good. The guitar tones sound just very raw and noisy, and it's just a great song.
Yeah, and I really like how it almost kind of foreshadows how noisy and fuzzy the guitars are gonna get when we get that one section where the guitar is just going. That's like that kind of, that little over the mini solo there is a lot kind of noisier than most of what you'd have heard, and I think that leads well into the big fuzz explosions.
That's on like half this album.
Yeah, but that's what I love about it, this album.
Alright. So good thing is that for these last 4 tracks, I do have a lot of memories of them, so I won't just be sitting here saying nothing. So, yeah.
Well, hey, it's fine to not have everyone being being like the star of the show, stumbling over themselves like I am.
Yeah.
One thing I'll say about these last 4 songs, I think this is where the album, the flow from song to song, from tracks 7 to 11 here, I think this is when it starts to feel really conceptual, especially when we get into the last 2 tracks and how they just kind of fade into one another.
Right, because those are the last songs that I did really like. But next song is Rusted Wheel. And I really like this one as well. I like sort of the slow vibe it has, and sort of I think the key works really well. The kind of mix between G and D really sort of, proves to make a song that feels relaxing, and it works just really well in my opinion.
Yeah, this one's great. Like, when the first couple times I listened to this album, I don't think it stood out much to me, but it's like, those keyboards at the start are really ambient. I like how the drum at the start is just like a kick drum, just kind of like giving you this slow, like, kind of thump to the song. This song is pretty clearly about ennui. It's pretty clearly about feeling stagnant, as exemplified by Rusted Wheel. And just kind of
Rusted Wheel, something. I don't know how it goes.
Rusted Wheel, planted still. That's the.
Oh yeah, okay, now I remember.
That's the companion lyric. And it really just feels that way. It's like when you're sitting around in your room and just kind of like that kind of like almost uneasy feeling, especially because this song is like, I think one thing that helps the keyboards stand out so much in this song is that it's mostly low range. It's like clean guitar playing a pretty low guitar part, and like the bass doing the same part, and just the kick drum. So it's like this song really feels like having an almost kind of like uncomfortable feeling in your chest when you start out. And then this song, one thing I really like about it is that this song, it definitely gets a lot builder. It
definitely has a lot of Bob the Builder in it.
It gets a lot bigger. Like, eventually the keyboards are kind of like playing more of like just kind of some big chords, and you have some cymbals crashing away and some guitar fuzz, but it still has this like this almost tranquil yet kind of uneasy vibe. It still has that same kind of atmosphere when it gets into the bigger sections, especially because I think it helps. Like, this is another song where I think the backing vocals stand out, or when it comes in towards the end there, because they're so moody. Whereas like so it really is just kind of, I think that's what is really the glue holding this song together. Yeah.
Alright, any thoughts, Max?
I like how this song is basically like one big just uphill battle.
Yeah, it does feel like climbing.
Yeah, it's I feel like it kind of takes the idea of like and kind of amplifies those like it's like even more anxious.
You kind of cut out there for a second. You were saying it's like what, but building on those emotions?
It's a lot like Lazy Eye, but builds on those emotions. It's a lot more anxious, but then I think it also kind of lets out a lot more anger.
I think it's
right. Yeah,
I'd almost say the opposite, where I'd say it's like kind of focusing in on kind of like the first half of the song almost. As it's kind of like if you took the first half of that song and made it into its own. They're both around the same length, and I think they both accomplish a lot in that time.
And by like letting out more anger, I mean it's kind of letting out the energy in more of a mature and refined way.
Yeah.
Like the author's revisiting these emotions. Did I say author? Whatever. Revisiting these emotions and just putting more, allowing themselves to have more closure, basically.
Yeah. That is one thing I'll say, especially when we get to 3 Seed and Common Reactor, which I'm gonna have quite a bit to say about. But before we get to those, we have one of the kind of we have a nice oddball song here with Dream at tempo 119, which
this is another one that I thought was
is not good. At tempo 119.
Though if it was, you could tell.
Yeah.
It would be like completely different from the rest of the album. But this is another one I liked. It kind of had that bit more of like a faster thing to it, and I think the key works really well in this too. Sort of the F C sort of key definitely has that kind of moody at night feel.
This song, okay, so one thing that's funny is so I think Well Thought Out Twinkles and Lazy Eye have both ended up in skateboarding games at some point, but this song really feels like the image that I always get is like skateboarding downhill, because it has that, because like the verses on this song feel like very punky to me. Like just and like I'm sure a lot of people will be like, why? But I guess it's just kind of like it feels kind of energetic, and the guitar tone is a little less noisy and a little bit more kind of distorted and low, and it's just kind of like,
yeah,
it feels very like, I mentioned feeling this album feeling kind of teenage, and I think this is a big one, where it feels kind of teenage, like that opening lyric, "I took my seat and stared at the cardboard screen while no one cared." That always sounds like a kid who's like anxious to get out of class, and then you're fucking running down the hill when you get into the chorus there, which this is another one like Well Thought Out Twinkles, where the chorus is entirely instrumental, just really carried by a really cool sounding riff that I like a lot.
Yeah, you were talking about how this song doesn't have as much noise and it's a lot more sort of straightforward riffing, and that's what I definitely did like about it. I think the noisier bits I was never really a big fan of, but with this song I feel like the fact that it doesn't have it makes it feel a lot more feels a little more punchy and a lot more straightforward, rather than just like, wanking off with noise. Not to say that that's a bad thing, it's just like, sometimes it may feel like a bit too much, but
Well, I think it's helped by the fact that it contrasts the ambient section so well. It starts off with these really brooding, wordless vocals, and some keyboards doing some ambient stuff, and then just guitars come in, and it's so punchy, and then we think the song is over with an even more like kind of elongated ambient section, and then just right back into it. And again, like with the opening of Lazy Eye, just like the perfect lyric to get us back into it with "I couldn't end it there." It's like, oh, what's going on now?
Oh, the next section's coming in. I gotta get my titnailer. All right. So, any thoughts, Max?
It does feel like skating down a hill, as Ray said, and I think like that's only half the song though, because it really does build on Rusted Wheels. I said it feels like an uphill battle, and then you go down with Dream at tempo. But then there's this kind of very ethereal and calming bit on the other half of the song, where it just feels very quiet, very reflective, and allows the album to breathe as a whole.
Right, yeah. I definitely did get that feeling where especially when it's in between like Rusted Wheel and 3 Seed, it definitely did sort of feel like, you've had a lot of slow bits, but now here's a really fast bit to, wake you up a little bit.
It's like you're at the top of a mountain at the end of Rusted Wheel, and then you have this really big anticipatory feeling when you're in when you start tempo 119, and then you go back down, and then it turns out you're only halfway.
Yeah. So is that all our thoughts for Dream Tempo 119?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to bring up the next song, which is 3 Seed.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this will be controversial enough, but this is personally my favorite track on the album. I really liked the bass line, the way the keyboards and the guitars relate to each other, especially with like the keyboard sort of down progression where it's like or something like that, something along those lines. I definitely did. This is the part for me where I really think the ambient like really got in and really sort of established itself as like, this is the song that's really ambient and you're gonna like it, and I did like it.
Yeah, this is to expand on this mountain thing. This is where we hit the valley. This is where we hit the lowest point. And we're just like just like the keyboard set the mood so well, because the keyboard part, it kind of alternates between going up and down. which when I put it like that makes it sound like every song in the universe, but it's like either it's going like do do do, or it's going down into like do do do, and like
that's what I was talking about earlier.
And so the keyboards are really kind of giving the song this extra mood here, and then the bass line, it sounds like so good. Like, it sounds kind of groovy, but it still keeps that kind of melancholy.
Yeah, I really like the
atmosphere.
bass line on the song. It really reminded me of like early Mogwai bass lines, how they're very melodic, and like, especially if you I'm assuming you've listened to a lot of Mogwai, Max, but especially if, on like albums like Mogwai Young Team and Come On Die Young, like those early bass lines where they sort of emphasized sort of the melodic stuff. I got that vibe a lot from this song.
Me too.
Yeah, the very sort of it's like, it definitely does sound very early Mogwai. Like, it sounds straight up like, what's that song called? I'm trying to figure out what the. Oh, here it is. It really reminded me of Cody, if that makes sense. Like, it's Cody, except it's a bit faster, and it's not mixed really weird.
Well, at this point, Mogwai would have already existed, so I do think it's possible that could have been an influence.
Yeah, but I don't think they've mentioned it as an influence, but,
Well, I mean, every once in a while, you'll get, like, a band doesn't directly mention an influence, or they deny an influence, and it's like, okay, yeah, but it's pretty clear that you are influenced by them.
I mean, yeah, I feel like there's probably a lot more bands that influence Mogwai other than the ones they did list, which don't sound anything like their sound, but, what can you do? But...
Well, so anyway... no, you go ahead, Max.
Okay, this whole song, like, I agree with sound. I agree with you guys on sound wise, but like, this whole song sounds like a protagonist of a film about to make a decision, about the climax is about to happen, and it's very like contemplative in that sense.
Well, which
I really like.
Yeah, this song I love the lyrics to this song. This is
especially part about the burning like pieces of paper or whatever the part that was. Was it like
cool like the ocean, burned like a summer home, fooled by the notion that the sums don't add up at all. That's the chorus. But to me it's the verse lyrics that really get into this. The opening stanza here. Remove a bullet from my head, extracting overconfidence. Hidden so easy to pretend. Too bad the rush was found again. This song, you can, again, clear emotion, kind of vague. Yeah. It's like, this song is about reconciliation of some kind.
Right.
And especially, like, it kind of feels like, the Brian Aubert, the vocalist and songwriter, he said he has described the song as being about repeating patterns. And to me, this song, it feels like, it almost is like you're not just dealing with mistakes, but you're dealing with your own personal flaws that a bunch of mistakes come from. Like, especially that, I'm trying to think of the right lyric to quote, but there's so many good ones in these verses where it's just like
quote them all.
just link the Genius page in the description as a source for the video. And especially I like how this song, it benefits from having kind of a traditional structure because it has these verses and choruses, and then it goes into a bridge where it's like that's like a lot more uplifting than most of the song, but then it goes back into the chorus, which is so melancholic. And I think that fits this theme of like repeating mistakes and personal flaws, where it's just like, or it's like you get into the bridge where he's saying like that he is like gonna try to avoid some of these things, but then you get into that refrain at the end that the sums don't add up at all, where it's just like it feels like it's like that kind of emotion sometimes that you'll get where it's like it feels like you know what's wrong, but at the same time you feel like there's something that's missing.
Yeah, it definitely had that kind of, trying to go for something, but like, purposefully leave out one bit to just like have that kind of hanging feeling.
Again, refer to that YouTube comment on About Sometimes by My Bloody Valentine. This song is about everything.
Everything. Including the toe jam in the toe of the jam. I don't know if I can... I don't know what that meant. That just came right to my mind. But...
only other thing I'll say about the sound of this song, that moment when the guitar starts playing along with the bass, very good.
Yeah, I remember that part. That felt great.
Yeah,
but I think that's all our thoughts on this current song. Anything else to say?
Not really.
All right. So final song, Common Reactor. This is like the big build-up song with, all the emotions, all the power, all the over 2-minute part where it's just static noise.
Yeah, I love that part.
So do you like this song or no?
I like the song. I thought it was pretty good. I've never been like a big fan of like really long bits where there's just noise. I always found this part to be kind of distracting and annoying because it just feels like there could have been a lot more. And I think when we really start to talk more about Mars Volta, that will be a big sticking point. But spoilers. But this, other than like that part, I like the song a lot. It definitely did have that feeling of just this is the end. And, we're gonna build up to it. We're gonna build up, have a lot of energy, have quiet bits, have loud bits, have everything, and the universe, or whatever that Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy book was called.
Francis the Mute is better than Amputexture. Anyway.
Fuck you.
So this.
All right. No. Okay. Let's just wait until we do that.
I just wanted to like say that one thing as like a joke because I get close to the mic and that's funny and not bad at all. So yeah, this song also kind of like Lazy Eye in that it has the big build up and then the big explosion and then it kind of goes back down, and then this one also kind of has the long resolution from Little Lover So Polite, and it's also bringing in like 3 Seed and like Melatonin, one of those almost hip hop kind. This one's a little bit more of like almost kind of dancey in terms of the drum beat, but a kind of sampled sounding beat that's going on through most of the song. So it feels like a culmination of everything going on in the album stylistically, which is fitting because this song is a perfect ending song in so many ways. The lyrics here, the common reactor, is a metaphor for death. This song is about embracing mortality and like trying to make some kind of difference in the world before you go. Especially in that chorus, let's break the window panes and separate the walls from all the nails, because maybe if we're loud, we'll stay alive. I really love that lyric. Yeah.
Would you say this is a better dance song than Soon by My Bloody Valentine?
No, Soon is a better dance song, but this song is as good of an ending track in my opinion.
When I heard you say dance, I automatically thought of that song Soon.
Yeah.
That beat. All
and
right.
Just like, oh, sorry, and I was just gonna say like, I really like how that chorus. It's a pretty lengthy chorus, and I like how it really kind of builds up when you get into the second chorus after the big explosion of noise, because it's like the guitar is kind of playing along with the vocals at first, and it's really playful. But then the guitar is just like kind of blaring away some chords, and the vocals are more intense, and I love how just suddenly the intensity ramps up in the choruses there, and I love how I think it's kind of ballsy of this album to end on, like I said, all that guitar noise at the end.
Yeah,
especially because it's way more abrasive than the one at the end of Little Lover's So Polite.
It kind of reminds me of another album that I listened to. I won't say the name of because I do want to do it in the future, but of albums that do end on just walls of static and noise. Whether or not that's like a good thing or not is up to debate, but I just want to say.
Is it a Mars Volta album?
No, it's not. It's a different album, but
But what about you, Max? What do you think of this song?
This song is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I love how climatic it is. I love how it's kind of like a very reassuring song. Like, everything is gonna be okay. Like, it tells me, like, yeah, you've done some shitty things, but in the end, you're like, what, 16, 17? You still have a life ahead of you, so go live it. Now here's a fucking noise, 2 minutes of noise, which is awesome.
1 minute of noise, mind you.
I don't know. I always think of it as 2 minutes of noise. I don't know. Maybe it just feels more noisy than we give it credit for. But whatever.
But yeah, and since this is the ending track, I kind of want to talk about. I think this album, like Love List, is a concept album without being a concept album. Like, you start off with just kind of a big burst of energy that kind of continues, and then we're kind of bringing it down a bit, and then we're kind of building it up and going back down and building it up and going back down for the next 2 tracks. Like, it's kind of like a Coheed and Cambria album in that regard, where it's like a lot of times you'll have the first couple tracks that are all kind of the same mood, and then you'll get these kind of narrative tracks in the middle, and then after that the whole album is kind of like, the second half is almost where it feels even more conceptual, because it's like it's really just kind of like it's kind of dying down then building back up. There's always this up and down flow to it. There's a very narrative like flow to it, especially on 3 Seed and Common Reactor, how it's like especially just on those last 4 songs, like I mentioned, it's like Rusted Wheel is really building you up. Dream at Tempo 119 is kind of reaching not quite a climax, but like a big rising action, and then 3 Seed is when we hit our lowest point, and then Common Reactor builds us back up to an even bigger climax and an even bigger resolution. It's like, I really, really like the way this album flows together. And admittedly, there are some songs that I think don't fit into the flow as well as others.
Wasted On.
Well, no, Wasted On is a good one for the flow, because we need to build back down. I think more like, as much as I love Little Lover's So Polite, I'm not entirely sure about kind of the placement there.
Well, I do have to say that even if I don't remember large parts of this album, it definitely did feel like it flowed nicely. Especially at certain parts especially at the end, where, it did feel like you have all these songs that fit well into, like, its own little thing. Like, it could have, like, the last 4 songs on this album could have been its own EP, and it would have worked well.
Yeah. I think, with this song, I own the vinyl release of it, and unfortunately I don't have it downstairs with me. But they break it up into 4 parts. And I think that's when I really started to appreciate the flow of it, because the first 4 tracks kind of feel like their own little story almost, and then you get the next 3 tracks here, and then you get 2 more tracks, and then it's like you have Melatonin through Little Lover's So Polite, and then you have Future Foe Scenarios through Lazy Eye, then you got Rusted Wheel, Tempo 119, and then you got 3 Seed and Common Reactor. There's like 4 acts to this album in a way.
I mean, I could see that, but obviously I haven't listened to the album that way, so I have I have no way of saying whether or not I would like have the same experience as you, but I'm gonna trust you on that. I've trusted you a lot on this so far, so
Well, I don't think it's like definitively that way. I think the final 4 songs could be like their own thing. It's just they didn't want to if it's like they didn't have enough space on one vinyl to fit the full album, so they were like, well, we got to use both sides of it.
Sure.
But either way, it's like there's a pretty distinct narrative flow to it, and I do think it really helps that I think it really does help with those last 2 songs that they're both kind of about reconciliation. Like it lets this album feel more like thematically cohesive than it maybe would otherwise. Like
right.
I really do think, as great as all the other songs on this album are, I do think those last 2 songs are what really elevates it to being one of my favorites.
All right. So I believe that we've spoken on all tracks. Does anyone have any like last thoughts other than what Ray just sort of did?
I retract my statement. This album's actually like a 9 out of 10.
Hell yeah.
All right.
It's almost perfect.
So like I said, I kind of just, it wasn't really my thing, but again, it's not a bad album. I give it like a 7.5 out of 10. But I do have to say one thing. I'm surprised that we went this entire podcast without bringing up whether or not this band is shoegaze or not.
Well,
like that entire debate just like completely was missed, and I'm surprised about that because I've heard a lot of things about people saying that this band is either shoegaze or not. So
Well, okay. See, I think the thing is, this album is very interesting in terms of how it relates to the rest of their discography. Since most people who watch us are probably familiar with Digibro and the fact that 2 out of 3 of us are complete clones of him, they might know that that this is their best album. Depending on who, like, a lot of people will say this is the best album and the ones after this aren't as good. For the record, I have not listened to their 3rd and 4th albums. I've only listened to the first 2, just because I think the thing is, if you listen to their first EP, Peak Hole, that album is 7 songs, and that EP rather, and it's kind of a broader range of sounds. It kind of is and kind of isn't when compared to Carnavas. It kind of there's a little bit more of an acoustic edge to it, a little bit more of a folk influence. The kind of really fuzzy, kind of noisy guitars only come in a few times on the album, and the keyboards, they don't quite do the same thing as they do on Carnavas, where they're kind of filling in spaces or creating ambient noises and only occasionally playing high up melodies. They're usually doing that on that EP. So I feel like with this album, the band really thought to themselves that they wanted to make something really cohesive, and so this album has a much more kind of unified sound to it than that EP does. And I think so I think the thing is, this album kind of sounds different from most of their discography. Like, their album after this, Swoon, is a lot more directly like an alternative rock album and an indie rock album. Like, and it does, and don't get me wrong, there's 2 songs on that album that are as good as anything on Carnavas, just in a different way, and that's Panic Switch and Substitution, which are both just like amazing alternative rock, pop rock songs. But so the reason I bring up their changing sound is because I think that's part of why people will debate about the shoegaze thing, is people will be like, well, they're not a shoegaze band or a dream pop band, they're an indie band. And it's like, I think or they're an alternative rock band, and I think both of those labels can be applied to Carnavas, but I think the shoegaze influence on it is so strong that I think kind of I think it's kind of stupid not to consider it part of the genre, especially because I think this is kind of like the perfect album to get into like kind of noisier shoegaze.
Sure, yeah, no, I feel like I probably would have like approached Loveless in a lot more favorable light. No, maybe not. It could have implied I didn't like it. I do like it, but I would have been a lot more prepared for it if I listened to this album first.
Yeah.
Which is to say that I've recently listening to some of the songs on Loveless because I've kind of warmed up to it a little bit.
That's good.
Especially songs like When You Sleep, because that's a great song.
Hell yeah.
Alright, so your final thoughts, Max?
Okay, on the shoegaze debate, why does it fucking matter?
Because indie rock is that hipster bullshit, bruh.
Also,
Right.
I'm a Jessie clone, thank you very much.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine.
She's a mix between Digi and Jess.
Yeah, I mean the thing about genre debates is that people use it so that they can determine whether or not it's cool to like something. Like, people be like, oh, Coheed and Cambria isn't prog rock, even though they clearly are.
Or the endless debates about what post-rock is or not, like, especially with all the bands that don't like the label, even though, we're gonna call Mogwai post-rock no matter what they say, so.
Like, the thing about genre, and I'm gonna go hard on this point in some of our other videos, blending genres is a good thing for the most part.
Yeah, that's
like,
sometimes people do say that, like, oh, genre should be pure, but it's just like, genres are already arbitrary enough,
Yeah, like, every once in a while, you have, like, for example, Imagine Dragons, where they blend a lot of genres by dumbing them all down. But I think for the most part, people talk about the death of rock and roll. Rock was good, and now it's all identity politics and black people music. And the thing about the death of rock and that whole thing is that if you want to know the reason why rock died, it's not because of hip hop, it's not because of PC culture, it's not because of the radio going downhill, even though it is. It's because a lot of bands were too afraid to move outside of their genres or try anything new. Like, people will mock, like, a lot of the post-grunge bands. The problem with those post-grunge bands, like a Nickelback or a Creed or whoever, for the record, that's not to say those two bands are equally bad. Creed is usually just kind of mediocre.
This is not about sex. Remember that?
No, I don't.
Okay, that was just a singing video.
But anyway, the problem with, like, a lot of those post-grunge bands that were kind of dominating the radio in, like, the 2000s were that their scope of influences were just, like, the biggest name grunge bands. It's like,
yeah, no,
all the music was
or
just
like
kinda...
other bands themselves, like what the fuck are they called? The other Canadian band with, like, the dead in their name. What was it called? Like,
Theory of a Dead Man?
Yeah, Theory of a Dead Man.
Yes.
Theory of a Dead Man was basically just like shittier Nickelback, if that was even possible.
Well, they were more like shittier Creed, I don't know.
I don't know. Okay.
But either way,
I mean, like,
it's like, yeah, they were either ripping each other off, or they were just like a bunch of extended Nirvana / Pearl Jam / Alice in Chain ripoffs.
yeah,
And it's like,
all with, like, the same vocal style.
and it's like, and those bands are hated, but at the same time, it's like, the music, like, community, they have a tendency to, shun shit like that, but then they also have a tendency to shun, like, this album, or, like, Coheed and Cambria, or, like, the Mars Volta, or these people who are, like, blending subgenres. It's like,
Yeah.
if people flip out about, like, oh, Green Day combined prog rock and pop punk on American Idiot. And it's like, Coheed and Cambria did that a year earlier, but when they did it, it wasn't cool for some reason.
I mean, like...
And it's because they didn't fit as nicely into either genre. And it's like, why does that matter?
All right. Well, we could genre debate for a million years, but this episode is already as long as it is. So I think
it's a podcast. We can go for 4 hours and it doesn't matter. Not that I plan to. We are winding down, but I don't want to end it already. Like we know Max probably has more to say, especially.
Sure. Yeah.
All I was gonna say is, no one should ever give a shit about genre ever. I don't, which is why I have the most embarrassing taste of music.
Well, I think genre is helpful.
It's helpful, but no one should care about it.
Exactly.
It's helpful in the way that it helps you find bands that you like. But I'm not gonna shit on anyone because they're into a specific genre, unless it's like something like really really bad. But that's rare, even as it is. So it's not. Again, it's
Yeah.
I feel like I've already said. But right.
So this album, dare I say it, I think it's kind of like a landmark in its genres, because I think it's like I think it was kind of broadening almost the kind of appeal and kind of sound of stuff like shoegaze, with how they'll often kind of change up the song structure, or how downright catchy and infectious most of these songs are. I think when people talk about how their albums after this are disappointing, I think it's not just like, oh, the song structure isn't as interesting, or oh, this or that isn't as interesting. I think a lot of it really just comes down to the fact that it kind of felt like with genres, it felt like eventually they kind of moved to a different box and then were kind of afraid to move out of it. Whereas this album, I feel like a lot of bands would almost, I feel like this album almost should be more influential than it is.
Yeah, I'm honestly surprised I had never heard of this band before Digi brought it up to probably all of us, so
Yeah.
Also, if there is one thing I can say, is that the album cover really reminds me of that one part from Fantasia, where it's, Mickey flowing up the water. I don't know, it kind of reminded me of that.
Oh, yeah. The album cover is, it's a completely unrelated painting from 2004 titled Summit.
Yeah, I read about that, how it's like just a cropped picture, a cropped image, or a cropped section of that, picture, which, I mean, it's not that, different from other bands. I mean, Brand New did that with The Devil and God Are Raging Inside Me, and the Mars Volta basically did that on, like, every single album after Francis the Mute, so,
Yeah, and the title there was I had always thought it was a combination of Carnival and Canvas, but it's actually a Greek name, which is apparently an homage to Brian Aubert's heritage, which I didn't know. But anyway,
that's interesting.
Now we're getting into trivia. So final thoughts. I love it. Max loves it. Noise is a pleb.
God damn it. All right. Alright, so this has been the Esoteric Music Podcast, or Esoteric Music Deathspiral.
Yep.
Join us next time for a rather special sort of section that we're going to be making, which we won't announce till next week. So join us then.
A partial marathon.
2 of our fans.
Hey now, the first episode has like over a dozen views, man. We got more than 2 fans. We got 2 times like 8 or 9 fans.
Yeah, no. Alright, so
this podcast is gonna change music or something.
Twinkies. It's pronounced Twinkies, guys. It's now pronounced Twinkies.
God damn it! That was a good ending. Now we gotta do a new ending. This is Ray the whatever signing off.
This is Noisebandit, the stealing noise.
This is Princess Plunderphonics being the princess of having shit taste.
Okay, no, let's all go back to enjoying that shit taste. Both us and the audience, goodbye.